Hello and welcome to episode 362 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and the title of this episode will require a little bit of explaining. So ahead of that, let's just introduce the panel first. Joining me tonight is Audra Bowling.
Hello.
And making his Retro Encounter debut, Brian Mackenzie.
Hey.
And making her Retro Encounter debut, Tin Manuel.
Hello.
Tin, Brian, Audra. The title of this episode is RPGs on Repeat, because I thought that was a little bit less of a mouthful than RPGs you've played over and over and never get tired of.
Yeah, that's really long.
So, I mean, this is true of all of us. We have our comfort items. Things like a favorite song that you heard for the first time 20 years ago, but still listen to this day. Or maybe a favorite movie that you can watch over and over and enjoy the same amount every time. It's different from food, because if you if you eat ice cream, 10 servings of ice cream, the 10th one won't be as delicious as the first one, right? Sometimes there's diminishing returns when you for even for things that you enjoy. But for your comfort things, like sometimes familiarity does not breed contempt or diminishing returns. Sometimes the more you watch something, the more you like it, or the more you listen to something, the closer you feel to it. So I wonder if this same concept extends to RPGs. Most RPGs are not meant to be played over and over and over. It's usually a linear story of sorts that has a beginning and an ending. But we don't only play RPGs once. Like all of us have played some of our favorite games many, many times. And so that's what we're doing. This is another show and tell episode that we do several of these a year, where sort of everyone brings a game or a series or a topic to the episode with a connected theme, and then we take turns talking about each topic. These won't necessarily be all of our favorite games from the four of us, but they will be games that we've played many times and still enjoy every time, maybe in spite of ourselves or in spite of themselves. But before we share the games, I want to ask you, starting with you, Audra, like how often do you nowadays do you repeat or replay a favorite older game, or RPG, especially RPGs?
Not too much, I'm afraid.
Does that have something to do with you reviewing 30 games a year?
Yes, pretty much, actually. It really has cut back on the time I have to replay things. So, I still sometimes try to for certain games, but not as much.
Okay, Tin, same question. Do you replay games often, say the past couple of years, or do you mostly seek newer experiences?
I try to mix them up in between, but I have to say, past year, I wasn't also able to play my old go-to games. But yeah, I like to revisit them every now and then, after, I don't know, after 4 years, 5 years, just to bring back the nostalgia.
Yeah, if you have a game that was a new favorite, maybe you give it some distance first.
Yeah.
But then when there's been enough time and you feel like playing it again, it's just as exciting to play that. I have a couple games like that I wish I could replay, but haven't. I guess I'll take my turn now. I'm in a similar boat to Audra. I barely ever replay games nowadays, and that's because a lot of it is because I podcast for RPG Fan. I'm always either playing a game for the podcast, or I'm reviewing something, or I want to play a game made in that year so I can write about it at the end of the year. And my backlog is so crazy. If I replay an old favorite game instead of doing something in the backlog, I wonder am I wasting my own time when I'm playing a game I've played 7 times when I could be playing a new experience? I used to replay games a lot, but now I don't do it nearly as much anymore. Brian, same question to you. Recently, how often do you replay games versus playing new ones that are new to you?
I replay Fire Emblem games a lot. A lot, maybe too much. But outside of that, I don't replay games that often.
Fire Emblem 4 Shadows of Valentia, you might say.
Yeah, I pretty much have a Fire Emblem game in constant rotation.
All right, well, this dovetails quite nicely into the main part of this podcast, where each of us take turns discussing games that we do love replaying, perhaps in spite of ourselves. And so Brian, you want to talk to us a little bit about Fire Emblem? Like you mentioned that you always had a Fire Emblem game on rotation, somewhat. Which one's currently on rotation, or maybe which one is in rotation the most?
Well, this weekend it's new Fire Emblem weekend, so I've been playing Engage lately. But typically, I think Fire Emblem 8 Sacred Stones is the one that I have replayed the most. I really love that game. I think it is when Fire Emblem games started to become super replayable. Because it's got a small branching story, and this is where they added like the branching promotional paths. So every time you play, you can like take your units down different promotion paths, and then it has all of the things that make Fire Emblem games replayable in general, where you have a cast of like 40 characters, but an army of 10. So you get to mix and match however you want. They're going to get different level ups. The RNG is going to be different on every map. And I also think the fact that Sacred Stones is kind of easy makes it great for replays, because you can do a lot of challenge runs on it, and it's really approachable. Like you can do draft runs where you do it with multiple people and you take turns picking characters. Unit solo runs where you beat the game with one character. Iron Man's where you never reset. And I think this is one of the easiest games to do those runs on. So when I want to do a challenge run, this is one of the ones I gravitate towards.
Yeah, that's sort of the design philosophy for the 3 Game Boy Advance Fire Emblem games, 6, 7, and 8, which are Sealed Sword, Blazing Sword, and then Sacred Stones. Like, each of them got easier as you went along. Each of them, the number of total units got smaller, but the individual units got more powerful and had more ways to customize them. So in Fire Emblem 8 or Sacred Stones, of those GBA games, it gives you probably the most freedom and the most efficacy with how you build your team, which probably makes it fun to rebuild them a different way every time. Because like I can't possibly think of replaying Fire Emblem 7 without using Oswin and Hector all the time, because they are key cogs in my strategy every single time I play the game. But in Fire Emblem 8, you could build your heavy characters like Amelia, or the guy that looks like a Super Saiyan. What's his name? You know who I mean.
That looks like a
your knight. Your knight, yeah.
Oh my god, what's his name?
Yeah, I think his armor's green.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, well, yeah. But anyway, like you can build your heavy units differently every time, so you have more freedom, and it's a little easier, so you can play it in all the unique ways that you described. I've only played Fire Emblem Sacred Stones once. I liked it a lot, but I guess I was more entranced by other strategy RPGs that have an entirely different tone from Fire Emblem. Maybe we'll talk about some of those later this episode. But
it's Gilliam. That's
Gilliam,
his name.
That's him. I thought it was G or H, but I think maybe I had Hector on the brain, which is normal. Hector is like top 3 Fire Emblem characters ever for me. I love that man. But yeah, Amelia and Gilliam are your 2 options for heavy knights, and except for maybe there's a random general they give you also. But I don't know why I picked them as an example, but like there's a lot of ways to build your team every time playing Sacred Stones. That is definitely true.
I think Amelia is a good shout out too, because this was also when I believe the first time they did trainee units, where you had Ross, Amelia, and Ewan, who started in like a little baby class that only had 10 levels. Right. And then you could take them down a variety of different promotion paths. So Amelia could end up a general or a paladin. And that was kind of another way to differentiate your runs. Especially, it also helped that Sacred Stones was easier, because you just wouldn't use those characters in like a Fire Emblem 6 or 7 hard mode run, because it would be too much of a pain to raise them. But in Sacred Stones, it's not that bad.
Yeah, in older Fire Emblem games, they do have like baby units that they give you late that have a lot of potential.
Yeah, but I think this was the first time they had their own class, right? Like
I think
the
so,
S
yeah.
archetype still usually was a normal class.
Yeah, I remember them being called Ests. So like probably, I don't know, like Fear in FE6 and definitely Nino in FE7. but like stuff like the peasant that you get in Awakening, or like a special baby class that can become 3 different final classes. They hadn't really done anything like that before. But Ross, Ewan, and Amelia are so fun to raise in Sacred Stones, especially since they get 10 extra levels from most characters. If I were to replay it, I would like how I built those 3 would be near the top of my interest list. But Tin or Audra, have either of you played Fire Emblem Sacred Stones?
I haven't actually. That's why I couldn't really say much.
Yeah, I have not yet either, which is a shame because I like the Fire Emblems I have played.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe Fire Emblem Sacred Stones or one of the other Game Boy Advance Fire Emblem games would be a potential future Retro Encounter episode. But I hope that Brian and I are selling you on it a little bit, because it's one of the easier Fire Emblem games, but it gives you a lot of freedom and a pretty interesting story that has sort of 2 branching paths on it that are both worth exploring. But Audra, if you don't mind indulging me here, you also have a Fire Emblem game or games you would like to discuss. So tell us a little bit about the Fire Emblem game that you've replayed the most.
I've replayed the most Fire Emblem Fates and Fire Emblem Three Houses, actually, which I love Three Houses, and I have a like relationship with Fates.
That's very diplomatic of you.
Yes. I find the third storyline is probably the best one, just from a cohesive stance, but it's not great. But it's still a fun game.
Listeners, this might require a little bit of explaining. So Fire Emblem Fates is not one of my favorite Fire Emblem games, but it is interesting in that it has sort of 3 different versions or routes, sort of like a Pokemon game, where it had 2 separate SKUs, Birthright and Conquest, and each one had a different storyline where you took a different side of the same war, and a different way that you progressed from map to map and interacted with your units at base. Birthright is the one that's a little bit more like Sacred Stones, where you have a lot of leveling and in between stuff to do at your base, while Conquest is a little bit more like, say, Fire Emblem 7, where you go from map to map with less freedom between missions. And there was also a third route that I have not played, but did download, called Revelations. That and Audra, correct me if I'm wrong, it lets you sort of like walk the line between taking a single side on the conflict.
Yes, that's pretty apt description of it.
And so, I mean, is part of why you have replayed Fates because you wanted to see all 3 routes?
Yes. I just kind of wanted to see all 3 routes, and then you kind of have some replayability options of the different battles and the supports being different depending on who you bring into fights with you. So that was pretty much my main reasoning for playing Fates the whole way through.
And supports for people that haven't played 10 Fire Emblem games like Audra, Brian, or I is in Fire Emblem talk for these special conversations that different units can have when they fight alongside each other often, that unlocks their friendship and also gives them stat or ability bonuses. Supports are part of the fun of a Fire Emblem story every time.
Yes.
But you also mentioned Three Houses, and this is a game that I'm certain Brian has played, but I have not. I do know that it does have sort of at least 3 routes that you go through.
It has at least 3 routes, and then like a hidden one, I believe, on the 3rd route. One of the routes you can kind of choose a different path while you're playing it.
All right, so there's at least 3 starting points by which house you side with, and then multiple end points depending on decisions you make. Is that correct? Again, I have not played this one.
Pretty accurate, I think. At least on one of the routes, and then the other 2 are kind of just more straightforward once you pick the route you go with that.
Now, Brian, I'm certain you have played Fates and Three Houses. Do you find them as replayable as Audra does?
Fates is really replayable. For me, if you can get past the story. I replay Conquest a lot, but usually skipping the cutscenes. The gameplay in Conquest in particular is really good. There's really interesting maps.
Yes.
It's after Awakening where they started giving you an insane amount of customization with your units. Like any unit can get to just about any class, and there's all these skills you can build on your units. So if you're into that, there's a ton of replayability in Conquest. Three Houses is actually deceptively less replayable than you would think. I have replayed it a lot, but all 4 routes have basically the same first half of the game.
Yeah, you have to kind of get through those before it differentiates.
So there's not as much unique content as you might expect from a game with 4 routes. But this is another one where there's a ton of unit customization right off the bat. So if you like that, you could play 3 houses a lot and have a completely different team every time.
And plus then they added the DLC, the Ashen Wolves, so you get even more characters and another story branch point, which was fun.
Yeah, the DLC story was pretty good. I liked the story and the maps in the DLC. It was a lot of fun.
Yep.
Now, I have not played Fire Emblem Three Houses, but I am interested in it. I do own a copy that I got not that recently, like maybe a year ago or so, on a sale. Would it be enough for me to play one route and sort of get it, or do you think this is a game you need to sort of play through multiple routes to get a better shape for what it's about?
So far, I've played 2 of the main story routes and the DLC, and then I was kind of I want to go into 3 Hopes, but I think you can kind of play just one first just to get kind of a taste of it, see if it's something.
3 Hopes is the action game that's a sequel made by the Omega Force Warriors team, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I would say 2 of the 4 3 houses routes basically feel like a pretty complete story.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions that you have at the end of them that you think are going to be answered in the other routes kind of aren't anyway.
Oh, geez.
So there's 2 of them that I think give a complete story, and then 2 of them that I usually recommend for second playthroughs.
I mean, between that and having to replay maybe the first half of the game, I'm not sure if I'm more or less interested in trying 3 houses now.
I think if Blue Lions in particular is a pretty good self-contained story.
Yes. Blue Lions was my second playthrough and I loved it. And I loved the DLC storyline. That was really good.
Interesting. And for again, I tried the beginning of both Birthright and Conquest for Fire Emblem Fates, but fell off both of those for more story reasons than gameplay reasons. I just was really getting sick of I don't know, of my incestuous super siblings, I guess. But if I were to revisit Fire Emblem Fates, words I never thought I would be saying on this podcast, like, what would be the path you recommend I take?
Conquest.
Would you rather have good gameplay or an okay story?
Mm-hmm.
That both of those sound like Conquest to me.
No. Conquest does not have an okay story. Birthright has an okay story.
No. I was talking about good gameplay. That's what
do Conquest.
You should listen, listeners.
Gameplay.
You should listen to Retro Encounters story versus gameplay episode, in which I specifically mentioned which I value, story or gameplay. But all right, I miss enjoying Fire Emblem because I genuinely love, say, Fire Emblems 6 through 9 plus 13. But I fell off the series a little bit after being disappointed by Fates many years ago. So I'm wondering if I should give that another shot sometime, either Fates or Echoes or 3 Houses, because I have all 3 ready to go. But Tin, I'm sorry if we're alienating you in this conversation. have you played much Fire Emblem?
Actually, I only just played 3 houses.
Oh, nice. So you do know what Audra's talking about better than I do. What route or routes did you play, and is it a game you would think about replaying?
It's a thing. I played it, but I also fell out of it. So I'm not sure if 3 houses was like the first Fire Emblem I should have tried.
It made a really big splash, so I think it was the first Fire Emblem for a new generation of fans, or at least for a lot of fans. It's I don't know, you compare that to a Dragon Quest XI maybe, or Persona 5 maybe, where it was big and cool and popular and brought in a lot of new fans. But I guess it doesn't gel with everybody. I mean, I've heard so many conflicting reports about 3 houses, people that have played every route and love them, people that were weirded out by specific parts of it, that I'm really not sure what to think. I think I do need to play it for myself to form my own opinion. maybe with the Blue Lions route first. I'm not really sure, but at least Audra and Brian can attest that this is a replayable game that once it gets going seems pretty good.
Yes.
Well, Tin, I would love to stop talking about strategy RPGs for at least 5 minutes. And and the games that you have on our list here are not strategy RPGs much at all. So pick one of them and tell us about a game that you have loved replaying over the years.
I'll probably pick the first one, which is Dark Cloud 2.
That for our overseas listeners, that might be called Dark Chronicle.
Chronicle, yeah. I played this is like my most played RPG game ever. Like, I played it during elementary, I played it during high school, I played it during college. So it's every part of my lifetime. And I played it during the time I turned into like a professional already. So yeah, like maybe I should revisit the game again like soon, because I haven't played this again in like probably 4 years from now, or like 3 years, I think. For those like who's not familiar, Dark Cloud 2 or Dark Chronicle is like the sequel. Well, not really entirely connected to the part 1 of Dark Cloud. It was like it shared almost all the same gameplay elements, like rebuilding and crafting, and like the same grindy of clearing dungeon floors and all that. But
it's not a story sequel. You don't need to play the first one to play the second one.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Like, it's just the characters for both games are not entirely connected at all. So yeah. I don't know, like this game, like even up until now, I couldn't find a game that has all the elements that this game has. Like, it's a mix of almost every I'd say like RPG game that has farm sim and also like life sim, but then at the same time it's also really grindy. So it's like you have to invest a lot of hours in playing this game.
Now, I should mention, I have played Dark Cloud 2. I fell off it after a while because it was a pretty intense grind. But there are also some people that listeners might be familiar with. Marcos Gaspar, Steph Sabidlo, and Alana Hagues have all attested to the greatness of Dark Cloud 2 on this podcast. So that's at least 3 familiar faces, listeners, that you might know who all love this game. Dark Cloud 2 has 2 main characters, one of whom has wrenches and a giant robot, and one that has swords and can summon monsters and use magic. You go through dungeons, collect materials, and then use those materials and like monster items at all to completely rebuild multiple towns. There's definitely more than 2 towns, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, because I seem to remember I got to like the 3rd town and then it became overwhelming for me. But it's a combination of like action combat, dungeon exploration with semi-random dungeons, and a huge amount of crafting and freedom in building out your town. Like it's not just increasing meters so that a town automatically upgrades. You place almost every single building and item in the town as you build it. That makes you really feel like a dungeoneer and an architect as you're playing this game, and it goes fantastically deep with this. And this is also when Level 5 was on a pretty killer run, because this was around the same time that they did the co-development on Dragon Quest VIII, and also developed Rogue Galaxy. All 3 of those, Dark Cloud 2, Rogue Galaxy, Dragon Quest VIII, are all PS2 games. And it was sort of before they were making just a zillion Inazuma 11 and Yokai Watch games.
Yeah.
But like this is the action is a little slow and floaty, but other than that, this game gives you a huge amount of freedom and a huge amount of replayability just in how the dungeon can be different every time, and how you can design those cities every time. So I again, this is not a game that I have replayed over and over, but there are so many people that adore this game, and I definitely can see the replayability here. I 100% understand, Tim.
Yeah, like it's like it was designed to be replayed over and over again, because like even like the dungeons, like going inside them is like pretty random. And like also when it comes to like getting, like if you're also like like a someone who also likes to do almost every side quest like me, like
Ooh.
this game has a lot of side quests. Like it's not just focusing on the story itself, like the main story. I think I enjoy this a lot because of the side quests. Like there's a lot of things to do. Like you can also do fishing, and there's also like a mini golf thing which is
Yeah.
called this.
Oh, neat.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it Sfida or Sfida?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Svita.
know. I definitely remember Steph telling me a lot about Sfida in a previous conversation.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah.
Like I at until now I couldn't find a game that like offers all of these things, like in one RPG. And it's really too bad that level 5 hasn't like continued on with this series. Like I think nowadays it would really do well if they do something similar to this again.
I mean, the closest thing I can think of is maybe a farming sim game that has a lot of that has a lot of action in it, like maybe a Fantasy Life or a Rune Factory 5. But even then, they don't really have this. They don't feel the same as Dark Cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like Dark Cloud 2 just goes very, very deep with the 7 or 8 different kinds of gameplay that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different, and even a game that has a zillion kinds of gameplay in it, like a Final Fantasy 14 or or one of the Yakuza games. They don't let you build an entire town from scratch.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I didn't play Dark Cloud 2 all the way through to the end, but it was almost because I felt overwhelmed. Like I don't play a lot of farming or building games because I almost need more direction. I'm not an architect. Please, I'm someone that just likes to gain levels and open treasure chests. But do you have a favorite character between the wrench boy or sword girl whose names I do not remember? I'm sorry.
They're Max and Monica.
That's it.
Yeah, I do prefer using Max actually,
Nice.
because he had this, like, apart from the wrench, he had his offhand was the gun. And yeah,
Right, yeah,
I find it.
she had swords and magic, and he had a wrench
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
gun. That's right.
yeah. That he was a lot easier to use for me as well.
Audra or Brian, have you played Dark Cloud 2, or do you also miss the level 5's PS2 days?
I have not yet, but I kind of want to after hearing about it. Sounds fun.
Yeah, this one is actually currently installed on my PlayStation, but I haven't gotten around to playing it yet. I never had a PlayStation growing up, so there's a lot of old PS2 RPGs that I need to go back and play.
Oh yeah, geez. I mean, you want to talk about a system that's rich with RPGs? PS1 and
Yeah.
PS2.
Yeah,
There was a lot to enjoy back then. And you said you had it on your PlayStation. Is Dark Cloud 2 available for download on PS3 or PS4 or both?
I forget if I have it downloaded or if it's one of the streaming titles on PlayStation, but it is available on PS5.
Okay, so there is a way to play it either via download or streaming. Got it. Okay, so that's good. That it's at least a little bit accessible to modern audiences, because I am more of a Dragon Quest VIII guy when it comes to level 5's PS2 oeuvre, but Dark Cloud 2 is unique and special, and I totally understand why people could replay it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even. I mean, Sfida is the sort of golf game, but you can sort of play Sfida anywhere in a dungeon or a town. So it's like always random, or you can build your own Sfida golf course. It's pretty crazy. Am I remembering that correctly, Tin?
Yeah. The thing is, like, apart from that, you also get like rewards, like after clearing the dungeons, and you finish also the Sfida. So, like, it's always rewarding. And like the rewards you get are like pretty cool, because like they're like for upgrading equipment, or like trying out new accessories or whatsoever. So the game has a lot of content. That's why I think it's a type of game that you would want to keep replaying just to get the most out of it. because there are also a lot of like missable stuff. So yeah, so
right.
like one playthrough, I think you don't have to like uh target to play it in 100%. Like I think you'd have to go through multiple playthroughs just to get that.
To see everything.
Yeah, pretty
Well,
much.
I don't know if I would go through with a 100% playthrough because I very
Yeah.
rarely do those nowadays. But
Yeah.
this does make 4 games now that I'm thinking about replaying or at least reattempting. Uh, and this episode's not even halfway done. I'll go into my first game now. And this is a game that I know Audra has played, but I'm not certain about Tin or Brian. Dragon Age Origins was
yes.
not my first BioWare game that I played, but it was the first one that really captured me and that I wanted to replay over and over. I played my PS3 copy of that something like, oh, I don't know, like 6 times in 4 years because and then revisited it once a few years later after I beat Dragon Age Inquisition, which is the third Dragon Age game. Dragon Age Origins is the first one, uh, and it's because this game has so much interest. There's so many ways it can go, and so many ways it can begin that it feels even when you repeat parts of it, it feels rewarding and different every time. This is the first game in the Dragon Age series. It is BioWare was not allowed to make D&D based games anymore, like their Baldur's Gate games from the early 2000s. So they spent the 2000s building their own world, a fantasy world similar to D&D, where you could start out as a warrior thief or warrior rogue or mage and go through a world populated by humans, elves, and dwarves in their own version of a fantasy story. And it's really, really compelling. In Dragon Age Origins, there are 6 different origin points where you choose your race and your background, and each story is completely different and gives you a story of revenge or redemption or exile that sort of follows you all the way to the end of the game. If you can meet people that were in your starting area, and they'll remember the events of your beginning, and you like, oh boy, there's so many ways this can go. But basically, there's a threat that is coming to attack the world from the underground, but most of the world doesn't believe you. So you have to use some ancient contracts to rally the different races and kingdoms together to fight the oncoming horde of Darkspawn. But the ways it can go are so wild. I'm trying not to. I'll spoil one early part of the game. Okay, let's say you play the beginning of the game, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to talk to the elves first and try to recruit the elves to my cause. And you find this elf village that's being attacked by werewolves all the time. So you go into the forest, track down the werewolves, and meet the werewolf queen, and realize that all the werewolves are former elves that have been cursed. And you can and the leader of the elf village is the person that's sort of propagating the curse. So you can choose to try to go against the elf village and recruit the werewolves instead of the elves, or you can decide to slaughter all the werewolves and have the elves fight on your side, or you can try to broker peace between the two sides if you have a lot of points into persuasion. And so the werewolf queen will step down, and you'll have to kill some werewolves, but not all of them, and you'll be able to save most of the elven village. It's like there are 5 or 6 or more decision points like that shape the final conflict, and even and the decisions you make in Dragon Age Origins will sometimes carry through like 3 or 4 games down the line, and people that you save or places that you let die, you'll be reminded of them in Dragon Age Inquisition, which again came out something like 6 years after this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I've replayed this so many times. My favorite of the 6 starting origins, my favorite is Dwarf Noble, where you're accidentally framed for killing you're one of the 3 dwarven children of the king, and you're framed for killing your oldest brother by your younger brother, and are exiled. And when you can come back and help your younger brother will beg forgiveness, so you can help him to the throne, or you can side with your father's best friend to oust your younger brother that betrayed you. But your younger brother has progressive ideas for the dwarven nation, and your father's best friend is more conservative and will probably set the dwarven race back if you side with him. So it's there are so many interesting wrinkles and so many interesting versions of elves and dwarves and like fantasy conflicts in Dragon Age Origins. I love this game. I wish there was a good modern way to play it. Because I don't even think the website that lets you import stuff from Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age 2, I don't even think it works properly anymore.
Oh yeah, the Keep or something.
Yeah, the Dragon Age Keep. And so what really Dragon Age needs a Legendary Edition similar to what Mass Effect got a couple years ago that has the entire trilogy ready for modern systems. Because I just kind of I always kind of want to replay Dragon Age Origins again. Now, Audra, I know you've played this. Do you have a favorite origin story or a favorite class to play?
City Elf.
Oh.
That was my favorite. I love the difference if you choose to be a female one. Like how that even alters what happens to the bridal party. And like your perspective of it.
I mean, most of your friends get horribly murdered in the City Elf origin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. But it's
on your wedding day.
Yep.
I have played the City Elf origin. I think I made my my elf girl a vengeful double dagger assassin.
And I mean, it's just so great. I love how much like the origins and stuff come back throughout the game. It's just really impressive, the level of detail for that.
Oh man, Brian or Tin, have you played any much Dragon Age, and maybe you're hoping for a Legendary Edition as I am?
I haven't actually. This is like one of the games that I would just often see my brother playing.
Hey, your brother has good taste.
Yeah. The thing is, where is this most accessible right now?
Well, it was on 360, PS3, and PC. The best way to do it is probably going through EA's system Origin, or or you could try Steam, but I don't think Steam allows you to transfer a save all the way through to Inquisition because EA stopped selling a lot of their games on Steam. Maybe that's changed by now. I'm not certain. But I would go through EA Origin first on PC is probably the best way. To play a Dragon Age game nowadays.
I see.
Is I hope it's still around. Is EA still around?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah. Good. It's possible that they had all died out by now. I'm not sure. I still play my terribly running copy of Dragon Age Origins on PS3, and again, but I'm hoping for a future version like Legendary Edition. Brian, have you tried much Dragon Age in the past?
There's another one that's sitting in my Steam library. I've played a couple hours of it, but it's one of those ones I keep meaning to get around to, but I haven't yet.
Well, if you're crazy about voice actors, if you pick the human noble origin, the guy that you want revenge against is voiced by Tim Curry. So that's fun. That's a pretty big win. If you get Tim Curry on your voice cast. Absolute legend. But all right, I'm done talking about Legendary Editions and Legends in general. I want to talk about 4 games in a row that are all from the world of Square Enix, because each of us picked one Square Enix game for this episode, and we're just going to blaze through them in a row here. So starting with you, Brian, what was the Square option you brought to the table today?
Final Fantasy III. Not my favorite Final Fantasy, but definitely the one I replay the most.
And is this 3 as in the 3 Onion Kids, of the 4 Onion Kids?
Yes, yeah. 3 as in 3. With the Onion Kids.
So not the DS one.
No, that is the DS one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the original NES, Final Fantasy III's main characters were faceless Onion Kids. But then in the remakes for PSP and DS, which eventually got over to Steam, they were given real names. I think it's Luneth, Ark,
Ignis, and Refia.
Yeah, that's them.
Yep.
So yeah, they gave them characters and more story play in the recent remakes. But Brian, have you basically played this game every time it's been remade?
Yeah, so I played the DS version the first time. And this was one of the first Final Fantasies, because like I said, I didn't have a PlayStation growing up. So this is one of the first ones that I got to kind of experience at the same time as most people around me. So that was fun for me. Not that there's like a ton of story to Final Fantasy III to be like discussing with other people, but this is where I kind of like fell in love with job systems in RPGs. I loved the little outfits and how many job options there were. Especially some of the weirder ones. Like I used to love the little Geomancer outfit where they get their little like fur coats.
Geomancer's best.
Yeah, they have fur coats in 3 and like pajamas and nightcaps in 5, and then they look like sort of, I don't know, like woods druids or something, and burlap sacks in FF Tactics. Final Fantasy cannot decide what Geomancers should look like.
But they all use bells.
They do use bells, which is another fun
in 3
thing
and 5.
them.
They definitely use bells, yes.
And then they did the Pixel remaster, which I also played and is now my preferred way to play Final Fantasy III. Although every so often I will go play a translated version of the original game because there are a lot of mods for that. So if you want to do like a randomized run of Final Fantasy III, you need to use the original game. So I have played all of the versions of it, but the Pixel remaster is the one I play most often. Well, I guess probably not all time. I think it will be the one I play most often in the future.
Now, this will probably not surprise you, but like Final Fantasy was the series that got me in love with RPGs probably 28, 29 years ago in the mid 90s. And so in the late 90s or maybe right around 2000, I did try to emulate the NES version of Final Fantasy III. And I didn't get terribly far, but I got far enough to know that I preferred Dragon Quest IV to Final Fantasy III. But when it came out on DS and PSP, I'm pretty sure the DS version was first. That is how I finally finished it. And that version's really good. Like they give you a little bit more personality, and the writing's a bit clearer, and the job system's a little bit easier to deal with. But it's really, really fun. I love building up like double sword knights and ninjas and dark knights. Like dark knights in Final Fantasy III are really interesting and fun. You can tell how like they did an improved version of those for Cecil and FF4. But and also like they had the double summoner system with like evokers and then proper summoners.
Yeah, I just love the job system. And I think the reason I play it more than Final Fantasy V, which I think for most people probably has the better job system. I like that Final Fantasy III's is so simple though. Like with Final Fantasy V, I feel like I really need to use my brain a lot. Like I need to think about, okay, what abilities do I want from which jobs so I can mix and match them. Whereas 3 is a lot simpler, which I like. I like that it's just like, okay, I want to throw shurikens, so I'm gonna make this guy a ninja, and I don't really have to think about it much more than that. So you can have these varied playthroughs, but it's a little more simplified, and I don't feel like I need to like open up an Excel sheet.
I definitely have played Final Fantasy V more than Final Fantasy III, but I also have literally 100 Excel sheets from different RPGs I've played over the decades. So maybe the getting a little bit more thinky into my into how I character build fits me a little better. But I should say I think Final Fantasy III has the first taunt mechanic in any video game, because the Viking job, which they really should bring back Final Fantasy III Vikings, Square Enix, like is allowed to draw enemy attacks to it and with a defend stat. And I think that's the first time it's ever happened in an RPG. At least a video game, right?
I can't think of anything, but I've never thought about this, but yeah, I can't think of any that do it before that.
Yeah, FF3 is 89 or 90, and I can't think of anything else that does that. I should do some more research on this, but yeah, whatever. FF3 is good. Bring back Vikings. That's all I have to say. Audra or Tin, have you played Final Fantasy III, the OG?
I haven't actually. Maybe this is a chance that it's coming out right on newer systems in Switch and PS4 with a Pixel remaster soon.
Yeah, we don't know when. I think they said spring, but
yeah, just spring.
Those Pixel remasters are on Steam right now on PC and will be coming to...
I should just grab it on Steam.
I didn't get the Pixel remasters on Steam because I was sure they were going to come to consoles later because there was too much money to be made. And I was lucky to discover I was exactly right. And I will probably get all 6 of those on Switch sometime this year. But I'm not exactly sure. Maybe they'll be discounted a little if you buy all 6. But that might be the next time I replay 3. In fact, is when they're all on a console.
I played the it was actually the first DS game I played was Final Fantasy 3.
Oh,
That version, and I really liked it. It was fun, very cute and charming, and just I love playing around with the job system and stuff.
It's a fun job system, I agree. But Audra, there's another game that has a pretty good job system within the Final Fantasy universe. And
Yes.
Brian said that Final Fantasy III was the game that got him interested in job systems. This was the game that got me ravenous about job systems when I first played it in 1999 or 2000. So Audra, please tell us about the second game that you're bringing to the episode tonight.
Yes, my second game is Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh boy.
Which, funny fact, I did enjoy it when I first played it, but then I got to the ending and it wanted to throw it against a wall for the first time that I played it, which was always amusing. But then I decided to try the War of the Lions PSP port a few years later, and I fell in love with everything about it after that. So it's one of those games that every couple of years I just want to play it again.
The original version has a sort of clumsy translation
Yes.
that is sometimes nonsense and sometimes has absolute stone cold lines like "Don't blame me, blame yourself or God." That I still quote to my friends to this day. That like my few friends that have the shared experience of playing this around the same time. But I'm similar-ish to you. I played it in 2000, I think, and really liked it. It was a gateway drug for me getting into more strategy RPGs. Like I played Fire Emblem a couple of years later on the GBA because it looked like Final Fantasy Tactics. I got deep into the Disgaea games in the 2000s, which I wouldn't have been interested in without Final Fantasy Tactics. I've played a bunch of RPGs with grids and squares and classes and exploitative gameplay like FF Tactics, but it was my gateway drug into this kind of game. Even though I definitely know it's not the first RPG of its kind.
It was actually mine too.
Yeah, but I didn't really replay it on the PS1. I just played one file on it for ages on the PS1. But then when the PSP version came out, I played it for like hundreds of hours again.
Yes.
And oh boy, the different ways you can build your characters in this game. My favorite thing to do is to give a black mage samurai swords, so it can use those powerful draw out moves with a high magic stat, or giving a ninja knight skills so they can like break enemies' attack or speed twice in one turn.
Yeah, I remember I had fun. Cloud, I actually made a time mage, and it ended up being really potent.
Yeah, because Cloud's moves all have a long charge time, and the time mage can probably half that. And then and Cloud's moves also they're not like physical attacks. They're like weird charged up magic attacks and status effects. Cloud's weird in FF Tactics, but he's fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed that game so much, and I love like how they have the the secondary classes that you can get, and it was the first time I really played around with the job system, so I just had fun experimenting with it, and.
And then the War of the Lions version has a new translation that's like really Shakespearean and poetic, and a couple more job system stuff, and some limited multiplayer that lets you get rare items if you play with a friend, which me and one particular friend really farmed the hell out of.
And it even has some extra scenes and stuff, like the Reyes and Beowulf stuff, which I really like.
Yeah, and they turned some of the in-game scenes into animated cutscenes that are really beautiful. The art style on the remake is really distinctive. They really need to bring that remake to more stuff, especially now that the Tactics Ogre remake did pretty well last year. Well, when's FF Tactics getting its turn?
I know. It should. I'd replay it again.
Tin or Brian, have you played much Final Fantasy Tactics? Because I mean, it's probably one of my top 5 RPGs of all time. I strongly recommend it if you haven't.
Shockingly, I haven't, which is very strange to me every time I remember that I haven't, because I love Final Fantasy and I love tactics games, so I need to get around to it, but I haven't yet.
It's very good.
Yeah, same here. My brothers and I have this thing that if we're playing this game is mine, you know? Like like back then my eldest brother was playing this, and whenever we take turns playing games, like we'd watch each other play that game, so it's like we're also getting spoiled already. So
Ah.
we're yeah, so that's how we handled it. So that's pretty much why I haven't played this. So maybe it's time for me to get into this because everyone's raving how good it was.
Oh, it's excellent. Oh boy.
It's really
Where do
good.
I begin? My favorite Final Fantasy game is probably a giant 3-way tie between 6, Tactics, and 14.
I see.
And I think the story holds up. The character dynamic between Ramza and Delita is really special. The way you can play around with the job system is absolutely bonkers. There's a class called Calculator in the original version, and I think it was renamed. Oh shoot! It was renamed like mathematician. I think in the War of the Lions remake, it lets you
Yes.
program equations so that like every character on the board that's a level with a multiple of 3 gets holy cast on them. Or you could do that like every enemy that's at a height that's a prime number gets flare cast on them with instant damage, no healing. There are so many ways to break the game and twist the game around, and so many exciting NPCs like Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, a knight that's in love with a dragon named a knight named Beowulf in love with a dragon named Reyes
Reyes,
that Audra mentioned earlier, or Sid Orlandu, which is maybe the best Sid in Final Fantasy history.
Thunder God Sid, yeah.
Thunder God Sid is an absolutely kick-ass Sid. And they even added our little romance scenes in War of the Lions between Agrias and Mustadio, who are just like Act 1 or Act 1 and 2 characters in the original Final Fantasy Tactics, but in the remake they give you Act 3 and 4 scenes that show that they fall in love with each other. That's just adorable. Final Fantasy Tactics is so special. I really, really hope it gets a modern remake, kind of like all these Saga remakes or Tactics Ogre Rebirth, because it absolutely deserves one. Maybe it's coming, and it will be just another retro encounter prediction for 2023. We'll see.
I would love it if it happened.
Isn't this like one of those on the list during when that Nvidia leak came out?
I think it was, but there was also like a Final Fantasy IX remake on the list.
Yeah, I remember both of them. But yeah, it's just the 2 of them missing now.
I don't know if we should be reporting on those because that really wasn't official news. But I would not be surprised if if it's happening, because I mean Square Enix knows that this is a beloved game and it would probably really sell well some form of remake. So hopefully that happens soon, and that'll give Tin and Brian the perfect chance to play it when that happens. Okay, but that's enough about Final Fantasy Tactics, even though I could talk about FF Tactics forever. Retro Encounter did 3 Final Fantasy Tactics episodes in 2015, but I wasn't on them because I was worried I would talk too much on them. So I deliberately sat out the Final Fantasy Tactics episodes 8 years ago. Maybe I should do new ones just so I can pop off for 70 minutes in 2023. But Tin, you have a Square Enix game on your list that came out 20 years after Final Fantasy Tactics did.
Yeah, the game is not so far off yet. Like, it's still, for me, I think this is still a bit recent. It's Nier.
Yeah, Nier Automata, a game that I played for the first time on this podcast a couple of years ago. And I do not have the history with this game like I do Final Fantasy Tactics, but it is really special. So, Tin, please tell us about Nier Automata.
Yeah, I think Nier Automata is also designed to be played. Like, I might be cheating a little bit in here, since this game is played like designed to be played with multiple playthroughs, just to get almost like just to digest like the entire story of it. So
Well, okay, sort of.
yeah,
It's
yeah, sort of.
There's 5 endings, A, B, C, D, E,
Yeah, yeah.
and then
Then the
21 other
rest
endings,
are
F
like
through Z.
silly. Yeah. Yeah,
But
they're all silly endings.
but like to get the whole story or most of the story, you have to do those 5 runs. But each playthrough is different from the last one.
When I first also played this, actually, like when it first came out on 2017, I had zero clue what I would, what's ahead of me. And only thing I knew that it was just more of like an action RPG, like with all the hack and slash thing. But I had no idea that this game would blow my mind after. Um, I'm pretty sure like even those people who are listening would definitely relate to me. Like, um, the first time like I played this, it was also during the time like I had a lot of free time to play games, so it was a perfect timing for me. So even and nowadays I still can't put it into words like exactly how I felt playing this game. So it's kind of difficult for me right now, but um this game is also available now in Switch, right? So like the
Oh yeah.
Yohaha edition recently came out as well. And I don't know. I played this during 2017, and I also played this 2019. And both times that I played this, like I they were just like I had to keep on repeating even during those times. The
Mm.
first time I played it, I tried playing it on the hardest difficulty, and I regret it because it was it ate up so much of my time, and I just settled back into a lower difficulty, which was hard, because very hard mode was too crazy for me. So I must say as well, like playing this game, the first mission of the game is the lengthiest, and the for me it was the most difficult mission for me. Like after clearing the first mission, it was kind of like a breeze already going through until getting all the other endings.
Wait, do
And
you mean the first playthrough or
yeah,
the very first mission with
the
the
very
shooting
very
segment?
first mission.
Okay.
Because that one has a long what do you call this, long checkpoint. Like once you die at this part, you just repeat from the very very beginning.
And there's also a shooting segment that you're not really prepared for, and
Yeah,
if you haven't already played the game, it does throw you into the fire immediately.
yeah, that one. And like I just kept dying there during the beginning, and it's kind of unfair that the checkpoint is really really far off before actually making a progress. So yeah, I don't really want to spoil much as well. Like I want everyone to experience this like fresh, and like also like they had zero clue also upon entering in.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil this for other people as well, especially since I mean the game is 2017. It's not that old.
Yeah, yeah.
I double checked our episodes on it. I played this game in early 2020, so it was probably the last game I played for the podcast before the pandemic struck in March of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I played it for the first time. I was really blown away by it. The action is intense and fun. There's a lot of weapons to upgrade and a lot of styles you can play as. There's it depends on what playthrough you're on and what characters you're using. But there's action that's either like really intense 2-weapon action that switches between like shooting segments when you're on your sort of like where you're sort of flying like a fighter jet, and
Mm-hmm.
sections where you hack into enemy robots and like take control of them or destroy them from within by playing mini games.
Mm-hmm.
It can and the storyline goes really unexpected emotional places that are about like what does a robot that start to feel feelings mean it has a soul? Like is an android that wants to be human and cares so much about humanity? Are they human themselves? There's a lot of different science fiction questions that this game asks that are really beautiful and brilliant. And then there's a choice that they make you do at the end of the game after the final ending. And Tin, without saying what it is, I've only played this game once, but I did it.
Yeah, I did it as well.
You did it as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, Audra, do you know where we're coming from here?
I vaguely know of.
Okay, but
but
Brian,
I'm not gonna...
do you have any idea what Tin and I are talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, gotcha. All right, we're not going to say what it is, but let Yoko Taro, that beautiful bastard, he knows how to. He'll play with your emotions in his game designs, and Nier Automata might be the best game he's ever made. And there's also DLC where you can fight Yoko Taro and the president of Square Enix from from 2017, because this game can get really, really bonkers.
I wonder, like, how did they pitch that?
Yoko Taro's probably like, "Hey, I'm going to put myself in the game. Do you want to be in it too?" Or I'm going to put you in this game whether you like it or not, but here's some forms so you can't sue me about it. Like that guy is a madman. He wrote an article once about how he would design a Monster Hunter game where the more monsters you kill, the more people in your village die. It was completely dark. I loved it. Oh, that guy's crazy. But I don't know if I would go back to this game. That playthrough was so special. I would maybe replay it and try to do everything that I missed in the first time, because there was a couple side quests that I missed.
Yeah.
And that would maybe have me thinking about doing it again, but I don't know, because I really felt like I put a hard ending on that game when I finished it.
It's very amusing to me. I get so excited, like hearing a friend or someone say that, "Hey, I finished Nier," and I would always want to check up on them. How are you feeling?
I think I needed a hug after I finished Nier Replicant last year, a year and a half ago, right when that one came out, because that game might, like, it's connected to Nier Automata in some really interesting ways, but that one might even be sadder.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, geez.
It was more tragic.
If you want to play a great action RPG and also have a good cry in the same sitting, then Yoko Taro's got your back.
I can't wait what he has in stores soon.
Well, I mean, he did a whole section of quests in Final Fantasy 14 in 2019 and 2020 with with those raids that were really, really crazy. But I'm sure he's working on something. I'm fascinated to hear about what it is. If he ends up designing Dragon Quest 13, then I'm going to retire from RPG fan and podcasting and only play Dragon Quest 13 for the rest of my life. But you know, I thought about bringing a Dragon Quest game for this episode, but I ultimately didn't. This is a game that I discovered in my emulation days around in the early 2000s, similar to how I first played Final Fantasy 3 and even Fire Emblem 6, which is a game we mentioned but didn't really talk about today. Maybe the Square Enix game I've beaten the most times, even though it's not super long, so I've probably put more time into other games, but Seiken Densetsu 3, which is also called Trials of Mana. Secret of Mana is Seiken Densetsu 2, so it's all in that same series. I have played this game so many times, trying out different combinations and seeing how the different ways the story can play out, that I actually, when I was sitting with RPG fan people at E3, at our hotel room outside of E3 2019, I actually just started laughing and crying at the same time when they announced the big remake in summer of 2019. I was so happy, because this is a game that I have been telling every one of my friends that loves RPGs since I first played it in 2001 or 2002, that this game is better than Secret of Mana. It's one of Square's best games from that time, but it never came out in the United States. It has 6 characters and 3 endings, and what is it, 24 different classes at the end. I adore this game. But before I go too much deeply into it, Audra, Tin, or Brian, have you played Trials of Mana?
I have not yet.
I played the original when I was a lot younger, and then I haven't finished it yet, but I've been working my way through the remake.
Okay, all right, and Tin, have you tried Trials of Mana?
Oh, I haven't, but This I just bought the PS4 version like 3 months ago, and
Oh, good.
it's waiting to be played.
The PS4 version, well, it's also on Switch and other stuff, but the 2020 remake of Trials of Mana is very, very good. It recreates the story and classes and characters in a way that I was very delighted by. I mean, the action feels different. So I think that the original Super Famicom version and the remake are both good. They're both worth trying. When the remake came out in 2020, I immediately beat it 3 times in a row. That's just my relationship with this game. It's not super long. If you know what you're doing, it's around 15 hours. If it's your first time, it'll take a little bit longer. But the remake has New Game Plus stuff, so you can replay it with a couple of your party members way over leveled, and so it'll be much faster after your first time. But the game has 6 main characters. They're the 6 ones right on the cover. But at the beginning, you only choose 3. And those 3 are your party for the whole game. The other 3 that you don't choose, you'll meet in the story, but they never join your party. So based on which 3 characters you pick, you'll have a different team composition, and the character that you pick first becomes the main character, and depending on who your main character is, the final boss and final couple dungeons will be different. So there are like 3 different final bosses and final dungeons, and every character has 4 classes they can change into. So like again, there's 24 total classes, and you only get to pick 3 in one playthrough. So there's just dozens and dozens of combinations. The first time I played the game, I thought the Wolf Boy looked cool, and the Spear Girl looked cool, and the Mage Girl looked cool. But my team ended up being kind of bad. I had like I went like with the healer version of Kevin, and not a great final class for Angela. But so even though it was I didn't pick a very optimized class classes the first time I played, I still had fun. And when I retried it and started researching the class system and the different ways they could fit together, it got easier every time, and I felt more powerful every time. And it's always fun because this is a fun, active class a combat system that has a lot of combos and spells and different moves. And the 6 main characters, I love them so much. Like Kevin the werewolf, his attack power doubles at night when he turns into a wolf. And if you have him do the monk classes, then he'll have less offense, but he'll have healing spells. And if you do the berserk classes, he'll have better martial arts, but no spells at all for until the very end of the game. And that's just one character out of 6. Like oh boy, what's another one I could do? Charlotte, the priestess. If you have her learn priestess spells, she learns a bunch of like healing and boosting spells, and maybe one light spell for offense. But on her enchantress tree, she learns she summons ghosts to attack. She can curse enemies and lower their stats. But she still has some healing magic, but it's not as good as on the priestess side of her class tree. So, and the remake also adds 2 final classes for every character, so there's even more class diversity. But anyway, I've replayed this game over and over, trying different combinations, playing the different final bosses, picking my favorite teams, just seeing the characters in different costumes, because they're in the Super Famicom version, their sprites would change color when you change classes, but they have totally new costumes and looks in the remake version when you change classes. I just love them all so much, and I have played this game probably around, I don't know, or maybe around 15 to 20 times on the Super Famicom version.
Damn.
Over the last 20 years though, and then 3 times in the remake.
Yeah, it's definitely the most played RPG game I've ever heard from someone.
But it doesn't take that long. I'll just like play it for a week, and then and finish it. And when it was brand new, I did that like twice a year for several years when I first played it. But then in the 2010s since, I'll play it maybe once every couple of years. Because again, I discovered this when I was probably around 15 or 16 in the years old in the early 2000s, and then just played it a ton. I was on the GameFAQs forums talking about this game.
Mhm.
I helped write a forum guide about the classes in this game. If you have any questions, when you decide to play this later, I have your answers, because I know this one inside and out. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Trials of Mana, originally known as Seiken Densetsu 3. So I've talked way too much already. Thank you for, but our Retro Encounter also did 2 episodes on Trials of Mana in 2019 when the collection was released, and then we did one follow up about the remake in 2020. So we've already done on Trials of Mana on this podcast a lot.
Sounds like a very versatile game.
The storyline's not that it's not that deep. I mean, it's sort of simple. Again, you can finish it in under 20 hours easily, but the team design is hugely versatile, and there's 3 different ending scenarios depending on who the final boss is. So it's exciting every time. And again, it's dependent on who you choose as your main character. So you'll get boss number 1 if it's Duran or Angela as your main, then boss number 2 if it's Kevin or Charlotte, then boss number 3 if it's Hawkeye or Reese. So it's if you want to play it differently to get the different endings, it depends on who you choose first when you do the team choices at the beginning.
Is it connected to, like, the story wise? Is it connected to Secret of Mana?
It is. It takes place hundreds of years before Secret of Mana.
Oh, I see.
Yep. And the dragon that becomes your flying dragon in Secret of Mana, you see it hatched as a baby in Trials of Mana.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's but it's and also, like, there's connections between them, but like they have the same mana elemental spirits, but and there's names shared between the games, but you don't need to play the older ones to know this one. It's its own standalone story.
Okay, that's good to hear.
But I thank you for allowing me to pop off on that thing for 10 full minutes, which I know is a lot. But listeners, that was between 8 and 10 different games that the 4 of us have played multiple times over the years, despite them being RPGs that ostensibly have, are meant to be played only once. Wasn't an episode about, like, Street Fighter that you can play in multiplayer forever, or MMOs that you're meant to be replaying over and over, or playing continuously. These are just a bunch of games that are linear and have beginnings and endings, but we just keep going back to them. These are our comfort games. And I hope that you enjoyed listening to us talk about them as much as I did talking about them. But I have one last thing to ask the panelists before we go. And I'll give you a few minutes to think about it. But what's a game that you played recently, that you've only played once, that you think might be your next comfort game? Like what's a game that's new that you think, oh, I think maybe 5 years from now, I could be talking about how I've played this game over and over. You understand what I mean? What do you think is your newest comfort game or game on repeat? But I'll give you a few minutes to think about it while I tell the listeners about what RPG Fan also has to offer. Thanks so much for listening to us. We're doing 2 episodes on Ogre Battle 64, Person of Lordly Caliber, in the first 2 weeks of February. I need to play a lot more of that game before I'm ready to talk about it. And that game shares a lineage sort of with Final Fantasy Tactics, but not quite. I'm sure that will come up in the episode next week. But also coming in February, we're doing 2 episodes on Star Tropics. That's Star Tropics 1 on Star Tropics 1 and the second on Star Tropics 2. 2 sort of action RPGs for the NES that a few people on staff are big fans of. So I can't wait to hear how those episodes turn out. And also coming in March, we're doing episodes on farming video games, on the remakes we're most interested in seeing, and also hopefully some more Like a Dragon, which will be the first time I've podcasted on it since our Yakuza Like a Dragon 7 spoiler cast from early 2021. But listeners, if you want to contact us about Ogre Battle or Like a Dragon or your own comfort games, the best way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also find RPG Fan on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, YouTube, Twitch, always as either RPG Fan or RPG Fancom, with something going on every day on all of those places. On rpgfan.com/shop, you can see our merchandise store, which has apparel, coffee mugs, phone cases, and a bunch of stuff emblazoned with the RPG Fan shield. That's a great way to support us. We also have 2 other fine podcasts, Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness, and Rhythm Encounter every other 2 weeks on RPG music. And you can review those two fine podcasts as well as Retro Encounter on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or however you choose to listen. And those are great ways for us to leave feedback. But first, starting with you, Audra, what do you think is your new modern comfort game? And then how can listeners find you online?
Oh, I'd probably go with it's a smaller indie game called Numina. I just really love it, and there's coming out with a part 2 this year, and I'm kind of just wanting to replay the whole thing again already just to see how it turns out.
Interesting. Have you talked about that on the podcast before? I don't remember that one.
I think I have a few times, but
Okay.
I haven't gotten into detail about it, but I really enjoyed it.
Did you write a review on the site?
Yes.
All right, I'll read that review later to see what's going on. But how can listeners find you should they want to?
I can be found on email at audrab@rpgfan.com.
Now, Brian, your turn. What do you think is your most recent potential comfort game, and then how can listeners find you?
Yeah, I think I'm not quite done with it yet, but I think Fire Emblem Engage is probably going to be one, but one that I've actually finished. When I replayed Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PC review, I liked the second playthrough even more than the first, and I'm probably going to play it again before the next entry comes out. And if I enjoy that again, I could see myself replaying this every year or two.
I really liked the FF7 remake. I haven't played the Intergrade DLC, so I think before the next one comes out, I'm going to pick up that and give that a shot because I really did enjoy it. We did a Retro Encounter episode on it.
Well, that'll be a treat. The Intergrade DLC was really good.
And how can listeners find you, Brian?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at ActualLizardTTV.
Now, Tin, your turn. What is a modern new potential comfort game for you, and how can listeners find you?
For me, it's probably the game that I played the most last year in 2022, which is Horizon Forbidden West, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm also looking forward to the new upcoming DLC for it. And people can just find me in Discord. I'm just named Tin in RPG Fan Discord server.
All right, thanks, Tin. And for me, listeners, I probably should have thought of this ahead of time before I committed to asking the question of my three co-hosts. But for me, I think it's probably Hades. Hades is a roguelike game that is meant to be replayed a lot, but I liked it on Switch so much, I have bought it on PC for myself, and I kind of want to start from the beginning and re-experience that game again. I can see myself like maybe keeping one permanent save file, but then continuously replaying and deleting it just to experience that thing again, because Hades, I think, is one of the most special games of the last several years. And even if I haven't played it for months, every time I go back, I feel like settling into an old comfortable armchair because that game is just so fun and cozy, and I just love it. But listeners, you've probably heard me say this many times. You can find me online on Twitter most easily at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs at other times, and on RPG Fans forums, I am Monsoon Mike. So whether this is your first episode of Retro Encounter or your 362nd listen of Retro Encounter, we welcome people of all the experience levels. Just play or listen to things exactly as many times as you want. Thank you, good night, and good luck.